On top of building up their economy and infrastructure on the oceans for security, to make you get money and all, because they wouldn't starve if they did have to go to war, they could also raid Christian military outposts. And we're going to explain what they were. Okay, now we'll talk about the spiritual aspects. Every culture has an apocalyptic vision. The Christians have the book of Revelations, at the end of the world comes the coming of the Antichrist. But then again, human beings are just all slaughtered in that one. They don't have a say in it. There's all the cultures have it. The Vikings and the Nordics have Ragnarok, the end of the world. And this would happen as the apocalyptic mythology of the Vikings, one that has conjured endless visions of bedlam and chaos within the imagination of people long after the end of the Viking Age, and one that continues to grow in popularity and lore right up to the present days, the Norse prophecy of Ragnarok. The series of future events which culminates in an enormous battle in which many of the supreme deities of the Viking mythological pantheon will be killed, including Thor, Thor, Loki, along with many humans on the plane of Vigrid. Now, could you imagine in Christianity they were going to say there's going to be a great battle of the earth one day and the world and the universe and God is going to die? God is indestructible. So this automatically changes your mind. If you're a Viking, your gods are just like you, they can be killed. They're not perfect. They're not indestructible. They're not superheroes. They're you in a different form. So therefore, they're subject to the same fate and the same realities that you are. So your gods, whether it be male or female, like Odin spends his time trying to offset Ragnarok. His wife, Freya, she's beautiful, but she has a frown on her face because she knows one day her husband is going to be killed in battle. The fact that he even has a woman is interesting enough, because God in heaven has nobody. He's just a big guy who sits there going, "No, I will judge you, I will destroy you, and you better do this, and you listen to that guy with the suit over there, that guy with the funny hat on his head, because he's my man there, he's my sales rep down there." But there's different. When you have a different religious worldview, spiritual worldview, you have a different worldview. You have mythologists like Joseph Campbell, who wrote the book The Hero with a Thousand Faces, a book that changed my life. And then the work of Carl Jung, Man and the Symbols. And they show you that mythology all around the world is basically the same. I mean, no Christian stuff, and even some Christian stuff has adopted this, but basically the same. And people all over the world have the same feelings, the same inclinations. This is basic level of human decency that exists. And there's the similar struggles in love, death, survival, fate. Oh, they all exist, right? And they have the same thing. They didn't see themselves as someone who was going to be killed by God. They thought themselves as someone who says, right, the fight has begun. We're going to fight too. So they had a stake in the battle at the end of the war, where Christians just wait there to be slaughtered by the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and then be resurrected if they're good people from were raised by the angels. But in this case, and many like it, indigenous, and the Irish and the Celtic ones are the same. You, at the end of the world, you personally have a stake in it. You're in the fight. You're not a loser. You're up there with good. You've got the same chance as Odin and Thor. You're not there to be slaughtered. And so the description of the actual battle of Ragnarok takes within the edits. That's the poetic edits mainly from Iceland that tell the stories, and the prose edits of the books of this. Tell of the fire giants burning bridges down, giant serpents splashing toxic liquids upon opposing armies, along with several mentions of weather warfare, including mighty winds and targeted tidal waves. Now, we live in an age where both the Americans and the Russians and the British are trying to develop weather weapons. This has been shown. DARPA in the United States is trying to develop weapons that, instead of dropping a bomb on a country, they can kill their food harvest. They can change the weather, the sun. They can create hurricanes and guide them into country, into cities. They can have tidal waves that will destroy coastal areas. These are all real projects that the Americans have been working on for years. So even in their prophecies, the idea is that that also exists. So there's a certain element of truth. Such will be the fury of the battle and the events surrounding Ragnarok that allows Fenrir, the giant wolf, to break forth from his cage. And then, following the death of Odin, he and the other giant beasts will then tear each other asunder until the entire world sinks to the bottom of the seas, which has been turned into a boiling cauldron by the intensity of the battle. So it's pretty apocalyptic, it's pretty intense, and nobody gets out. Everyone has the same fate. Both the gods, the bad guys, and the good guys have the same fate, or the same battle. Now consider that. Now this is what caused them to leave Scandinavia and build ships when it all started with Sheridan, because the Ragnarok was wired, it was hardwired inside them, ready to go. They were aware, it was like ready to deal with this. And so consider Ragnarok in the context of the Vikings being forced to metaphorically enter their own boiling seas so as to avoid the very real Christian Ragnarok that was being foisted upon them by Charlemagne. They had already heard what happened to Saxons. This is the end of the world, these guys are serious, this is crazy, they're not going to kill us. The mythology itself gave the Vikings the psychological foundation from which to launch their social and cultural metamorphosis, that being the farmers of the land to the warriors of the high seas, and that's what triggered it. That's why they started building longships in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, and parts of Finland. That's why they started building them, because they had in there. So when they heard what happened to the Saxons and what was going on in the rest of Europe, they thought of Ragnarok. Even subconsciously, what happened in Ragnarok? Well, the humans were in on the fight too. They didn't just lie down and be slaughtered. Whereas if you have an apocalyptic culture that actually believes its fate is to be destroyed, and we're going to see that in a minute, when this stuff does happen, they lay down and they wait to be killed. They lay down and wait to be killed. Even if they're fought fighting, they still believe they're going to lie down and wait to be killed. Because that's what happened in the Bible. God kills them all. God kills them all. The Vikings were not just refugees running in terror from the advanced Christians. They were more akin to seeing themselves as earthbound Einheimer. Now they were the berserkers and the warriors who fought in Viking battles. And if they died in battle, they were brought by the Valkyries up to Odin's long hall at Valhalla, and there they trained for the end of the world. So, as above, so below. Very common in many cultures. What we learn from our spiritual traditions prepares us for things that may go wrong here on earth. So they were ready for when this happened, because already they were seeing themselves in that way. When our warriors die and go to heaven, they don't just sit around with virgins or wearing big white rings and footring and playing the harp. They don't do that. They're up there training. They're still active. They're still up there, and they're being served meat and they're drinking with Thor and Odin and having a great time. And they're waiting for the end of the world when the signal comes in, and they'll worry out they're protecting humanity, and humanity will be fighting alongside them. You see, this is why stories like films like The Lord of the Rings touch people so deeply. People go to see films like The Lord of the Rings, and they see about the elves, and they see about the Gondor, and they see about the hobbits, and they see about Gandalf. And it's not that those films are great. And it wasn't just because they had great fight scenes in them. It wasn't because they had great meaning, great stories in them, or acting. It's because they reminded us, on some level, that that's the kind of gods we used to have. That there really was stories like this in our past. And that's why they touched us. When we saw those movies, they touched us so deeply. And that's why J.A.R. Tolkien wrote those books, The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion and The Hobbit, because he was he was a mythologist. He was also a professor of linguistics, and he learned language like Nordic, like Finnish, like Welsh. And he realized that what Carl Jung had said, Joseph Campbell had said, that modern humans were neurotic because their technology and their societies and their laws were moving faster than their mythologies. You understand? So they were not creating mythologies to compensate for changes in society that could help them ease them through. We were moving too quickly and too fast. And J.A.R. Tolkien was one of these guys who said, I'll start writing a modern European mythology, and maybe that will help people outside, even though he was a devout Catholic himself, but using these old, and many of the stories are derived from Viking, Celtic, Finnish, German, Saxon stories, and based on those ideas. Because he too realised after World War I, when he saw the people being marched into machine guns, World War I was the ultimate in control. You would have the British on one side, the French on the other, and the French, the British, all these other sides, and the officer would blow the whistle, and the guys would climb up the top of the thing and walk into machine gun booths. And I just did it without question. Both of them did. The British did it, French did it, Germans did it, because you were so controlled. And it was done because the officer class, the officer would have a stick in his hand, or a whistle, forward, all dead. And he saw this firsthand, and he wanted, there are lots of, like many people, that war had changed people. What had made people so stupid that they would walk right into machine guns and be killed for no reason, and millions and millions and millions and millions dead? And that war led to nowhere, it achieved nothing. It's because those wars were all sanctified by kings and kaisers and Ottoman sultans. So when the English walked into machine guns, it was for king and country. When the Germans did it, it was for Kaiser. When the French did it, it was for the Republic. Republic. And when the Ottomans did it, it was for Allah and the Sultan. And again, one king on earth, one king in heaven, and you're being judged and being walked in. And that's why World War I affected so many people so did. That's why art and everything changed after that. Everything changed after World War I. That's when psychology came about. People were trying to understand, why is there no young men left in England? Why is there no young men left in Germany? Well, what you mean, they just marched into machine guns for no reason? And that was a pivotal point. That's when the world changed. The world changed around the big time around then. And that's when they'd gotten so far to the point where millions of people would, without question, would just walk into machine guns. And that's why they make a big deal of that war. I don't think Norway was involved in World War I, but the countries that were, they still make a big deal of it. Every November 11th, when the armistice was signed, the Queen goes to the cenotaph in London, and for the 2 million British soldiers who were killed for nothing, lays a wreath. You have the tomb of the unknown soldier, the Arc of Triomph. It's all very ritualistic and weird and creepy. And it's all about loyalty. All loyalty. And that's the royal law, the God law. So the Vikings were different because they didn't have a big God in the sky who told them what to do. They were able to be more adaptable. So the Vikings were not just refugees running and terrifying mass of Christians. They were more like these guys that they were told about in the sagas, who were in heaven ready for a fight. Let's go, we're ready. When all falls apart, we're ready. We're going to fight too. So it created a kind of a proto-Ragnarok on Earth at that time. It taking place in Northern Europe following the massacre of the Saxons at the bloody Verdun. So the exact opposite happened in what Charlemagne expected. Charlemagne expected that if we kill these 4,500 Saxons, the Scandinavians did this. Please don't kill us. But he didn't bargain on the fact that because they had better gods. They had gods that served them better. They had gods that stood alongside them, not gods that ordered them. But the exact opposite happened. They thought to themselves, this is kind of like a modern, this is kind of our own Ragnarok. What happened in Ragnarok? They fought. And they got smart. And they got with it. They didn't want them to die. With the personal and collective subconscious of the Vikings after 782, Charlemagne would have represented nothing less than the living embodiment of the Wolfenrir. It was only a matter of time before they too would be torn asunder by his insatiable fangs and vicious claws. They just didn't see him as a human, they saw him as a psychopathic wolf that would tear anything to pieces. He wasn't a great king, he was a crazy madman. And that was good. So we know he's a crazy madman. We don't have to obey him. We'll hide him and we'll fight him some other way. You don't fight a wolf by attacking it. You fight smart. You create smells that sends him on a wrong diversion. You hide up a tree. You leave meat for him. That's why you're poisoned. You don't charge after a wolf with your fists. See? Metaphor, mythology. People don't understand. When people hear the word word myth today, they think it's just a story. It's not real. But like Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung tell you, mythologies are the most real stories because they're telling you about what's really inside you and they can help you. So the Vikings had no choice but to enter the many earthly doors of their own Valhalla, the fjords of Norway. So they would have looked around the fjords of Norway with these ships. We have to get out of here fast and we have to strike at these Christians as well as get our economy going. And they would have seen themselves in that light as not just refugees running in terror. Right, lads, right guys, we've got the ships, we've got the weapons, we know what we're doing, let's go. That's how it would have been. It wouldn't have been, oh, we're so afraid, we wouldn't be refugees. But we know what to do. We know the sagas tell us what to do. We fight. We fight smart. So they went out on longships. It took them to breathe and ensure the counter-attack, and that's what it was. That's why the Vikings are portrayed so badly. They counter-attacked in the most effective way they could by hitting at monastic institutions, the soft underbelly of Fenrir, the wolf along the Christian coastlines of Europe and beyond. Now I'm going to shock you. When people think of a monastery and monks, Christian monastery and monks, what's the first thing they think of? The guys in the road walking around, they're so holy, and all they do is they pray and they write illustrated manuscripts of the Gospels, and they have vows of silence. That's not what those places were. They were military outposts. Most of those knights were heavily armed and heavily trained troops. The monastic outposts were set up as military bases. This is why they have watchtowers. What do you think the church spire is with the bell on it? It's a watchtower, just like a military base. Ring the bell. That's not really a spire. It's a military thing. Why do they have names like the Knights of Malta? The Order of Malta, the Order of Hospitallers, the Knights Templar, the Knights of Columbanus. They were warriors, and many of them were ex-military guys who were given a kind of reward. This is your pension. You killed loads of Muslims, you killed loads of Saxons, you're going to become an abbot in an English monastery. You'll get wine, lots of food, looked after well, women, anything you want. All you have to do is gather data on the locals. Write those books, guys, write those books. Get those names. You know what they always say, close the deal, close the deal. You know, the guy who's trying to get you to sell a house to him, what do they say to all the guys who sell houses? Close the deal, get that signature. He's working for the banks. Well, that's what these guys were doing. Get on that land in England, get those books out, close the deal. And they were armed to the teeth, and they treated the locals terribly. They treated them appalling. While the monks were behind closed doors, living on banquets, they had women over, they brewed beer, when there used to be no beer, they had butter, milk, cheese, they lived like kings. That's where the image of the big monk comes from. You ever see on beers, they always have the big monk? He's well fed. And he's well fed. He's happy. He's well. You know Robin Hood. You know the stories of Robin Hood, Friar Tuck. He does three things: food, women, and beer. Why was that? That's what they were like. If you got into the monastic institutes back then, after serving Charlemagne as a warrior, you got all the food, all the women, and all the beer you wanted. Well, that's what those places were. They were monastic institutes, and they were also military supply centres. That's why they were along coasts and inland of big rivers. So Christian knights, say coming down to England, would stop at Lindisfarne, be put up for the night. If they needed horses, they could get them. If they needed weapons, they could get them. And if you wanted to start a fight, guess who would be out there beside you with the swords and shields? The monks. Because they were all military trained. So how did the Christians portray it? The propagandist, the Vikings landing in these poor defenceless monks. We're holy men of God. We've never harmed anyone. None could be further from the truth. But they were also vulnerable because these monastic institutes were either along the coasts or up rivers. they could be hit real easily from the sea. So you could come in your longships, hit them, knock them out, right? And this is the most amazing thing of all. The locals did nothing to protect the monks. The so-called fellow Christians were happy when the Vikings showed up because they hated the monks. In fact, the Irish, the Dublin Gaelic chieftains invited the Norwegian guys over initially to attack the monasteries because they hated the monasteries so much. Because they were collecting, they would say, okay, we are now the Holy Order of St. Francis or whatever, right? And then they would say, all these lands that are here now belong to us. God has given these lands to us. And you have to start working for us. And then you have to start giving us, oh no, my father has farmed these lands for centuries. Oh no, God says that you owe us them. Now you think to yourself, why would these people do this? Why would they give up their freedom to serve the religious orders? They did. The monks came in like this with the swords. Give me 10 chickens or you're dead. And then get down to the fields tomorrow and get to the brewery and start making beer. That's what really happened. And so, because they were military outposts, the Vikings recognized their vulnerabilities and they were going to strike them. So, what's the real thing you must attack when your enemy is in your country or when you're attacking them? Is you attack their intelligence. You attack their ability to their supply lines and their intelligence. So that's military bases. This is why you have, like in Iraq today, Afghanistan, you have the Mujahideen and the Taliban attacking NATO bases, specifically for that reason. That's the reason why. We take them out, we've knocked out two things: their ability to supply the soldiers on the field, and secondly, their intelligence is in there too. That's where they're launching the drones from, that's where their computers are, that's where their hardware and laptops are. Do you remember about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a huge, the Americans went crazy because the Taliban had raided some place in Afghanistan, and it wasn't the fact that a bunch of American soldiers had been killed that was the problem. It wasn't the fact that a load of weapons had been procured. The Americans went crazy because the Taliban had got their hands on 5 laptop computers. They got the paperwork. And that threw the whole American strategy into chaos. Soldiers, disposable, who cares? Weapons, we got plenty of factories making them, but those 5 laptops, all stuff we're using to run this war was on that, and they have it. And that was the biggest victory for the Taliban, was getting those 5 laptops. And that was it. So the same thing with these monasteries. Knock out the supply of intelligent lines. And do we have much longer for the next break? 15 minutes? Good, yeah, okay. So that gives me... So in the mythological aftermath of Ragnarok, the world eventually falls back up from the depths of the sea to be reborn and renewed as a fertile land of opportunity and tranquility. The gods who survived the chaos of Ragnarok would then hold a council to decide to repopulate the earth with male and female who survived along with the gods. The two people find Sheridan and still that's an interesting idea. I'll talk about that later. The idea of that tree is really the matrix and stuff. The idea of it's really about quantum physics. Under the protection of Odin's sons and Thor's sons along with the hammer, and these gods would then emigrate to the unscorched lands of Eiderval, and a new world would be constructed. So the worst thing that would happen to the Vikings is, if it all goes wrong, you'll still survive. Life goes on. And that's a powerful spell. But to a Christian, well, what's going to happen is we're going to be killed. And if we're good Christians on earth, if we killed enough Muslims, if we stole enough cattle from those poor people in England, I was a monk and I did that, I would be raised from the dead and brought to everlasting life. That was a much better deal. Hey, we all die, so what? Life goes on. That's a very powerful spell upon a person's head, because then it makes them sound, then it stops them from being fearful, because when the Romans, one of the reasons the Romans didn't invade Ireland, and they should have invaded Ireland with the legions, because there was plenty of things there for them: gold, horses, a lot of farm stuff. they didn't go over is because they had such a bad experience with the Celts in England, because they had the same reason they didn't invade Scotland. Not because they were military defeated, but because they said they had no fear of dying. And whenever they would massacre the Celtic people, they were like, oh great, we're going to be with our families and friends now in heaven. We're going to the next world, the next reality. And they didn't care. And they fought for the same reason. And that's why when the Romans encountered the Picts in Scotland, these guys used to paint themselves blue, go into battle completely naked against Roman legionnaires who were completely tooled up, and all that gear. They didn't care. And they defeated them. Now, then he thought, these guys in Scotland are that bad, the Irish must be even worse, so let's not get involved in that place. There's a power in that. There's a power in not being judged. Again, they were the same kind of, they had similar kind of spiritual outlook. Many gods, and the idea that you had a stake in heaven on earth, and both work together, and you're not being punished or judged unless you were a very, very bad person, like a truly evil person. These were precisely the thoughts going through the minds of the Vikings when they sailed out their lands as both warriors and merchants to begin again with a new living mythology of the Viking saga, only to eventually set foot upon a place called Vinland. 1000 AD in what is now present-day Canada, 500 years before the genocidal Christian named Christopher Columbus followed on ships emblazoned with the same Middle Eastern insignia that Charlemagne's armies also held aloft during the Holocaust of the Saxons. So 500 years later, the Roman Church was still going around the world. 500 years later now, killing indigenous people. When Christopher Columbus landed in San Salvador, the locals came up to him. They said, hey, hello man, what the find it's a strange ship and all this kind of thing. And Christopher Columbus, one of his first letters back was, we'll have no problem killing these people. They're not fighting, they trust us. And he was the man who discovered America, even though the Vikings discovered America. It's not the Irish and the Welsh and the Chinese also discovered. Everybody discovered America. They knew where it was. And they knew the earth was round. They know that. But they just made these stories up. And on the front of the story of the three ships that went to America, there's the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They had white sails with a red cross, Knights Templars. So the same guys, same monastic order. And they went there to kill heathens, barbarians, just like they've done in Saxony. And the Red Cross was really a stylized version of the Roman fascia. So that's why they have a monk at the front. When they landed on the conquistadors landed in San Salvador, they would have a monk walking in front with a giant crucifix. Well, he was the Roman guy holding the fascia. We're here with the law of Rome. And you know what happened to that? 100 million Native Americans were killed. Between that and Wounded Knee, and up to the reservations in America today, the greatest genocide in history, 100 million Native Americans, north and south, have been killed since Christopher Columbus wiped off the face of the earth, since Christopher Columbus came along. Think about that. And the previous experience Native Americans had with meeting Europeans was Vikings who landed in Canada and just said, "Want to do business?" And the difference between that is one thing: it's Christianity and polytheism, many gods. Because the Vikings came to do business and explore, the Christians came to kill and impose law. And to show you how the law was so intrinsic to that, the Inquisition, which was originally set up to massacre people called the Cathars in southern France, they killed 1 million of them, by the way, who were Christian heretics. Christopher Columbus landed in San Salvador. It was in 1492, 1493. Within 100 years of that, in the depths of Peru, deep inside the Amazon, that would have been like Mars. Literally, Mars, the moon had only been discovered and colonized. The Spanish Inquisition monks, again, were in the middle of Peru talking to these native peoples and saying, "What's your name? Where do you live? How many houses do you have? How many wives did you used to have? You don't have one from now on. How many cattle? How many sheep? What do you do for a living?" And within 100 years, and you're talking about the most remotest places on earth, within no time, the Inquisition were in there with complex tax, registration, and legal birth, death, marriage certificate, and all kinds of other books on the Native Americans in the depths of in parts of the world that are still considered remote to this day. There was a monk there with going, Jane, what do you have? They come bearing the books. They come bearing the books. Before we have the break, so what was the fourth? After they built up their economy by sailing between Norway and Shetland, they used to go to Shetland and they would buy soap. They would get soapstone from the Shetlanders, which is a stone that's easy to carve. It's used in cooking utensils. Great stuff. When you heat it up, it actually gets stronger. They were bringing that to Scandinavia because they had difficulty getting steel and iron because there was a trade embargo. What do they do today to countries that are rogue states? North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, they put in trade embargoes. You can't trade with these people. You have to starve them. And this was going on with Scandinavia at that time, so they had to build up their economy. As soon as the Vikings landed in Scandinavia, in Shetland, they were building houses and living next door to the pigs. No problem, everyone getting on great. Good for business. The Shetland Island economy boomed. The economy in Western Scotland boomed. We're ready for the next stage. They hit the Lindisfarne. Now, they hit the Lindisfarne, Holy Island, the Kingdom of Northumbria. You've seen the TV show that the Vikings, that's episode 1, they hit the monasteries, and they saw the same thing, oh, poor monk, I don't have one, this kind of thing. Well, they went in there and they smashed the place up, and they caused capital. They also sent shock. It was the 9/11 of its day. They sent shockwaves around Europe because they could not believe that these guys had these ships and this ability, and they were that daring. They got, just like the guys in the Taliban, they got the laptops. And the Anglo-Saxon chronicles say, what was the first things the Vikings did? They made sure, in the TV show The Vikings, and this is one of the things that didn't happen, was they showed all the holy books burning on the ground. The guy lights a fire with the manuscripts. Vikings didn't do that. They literally went over and said, I'll have that. And they kept it. Why? Because there was information in that. And secondly, it was incredibly valuable. The Vikings didn't use that stuff, but they knew the power of that new Christian world. This was that they were getting the laptops. And they were breaking down. And the Irish Annals reported as just more of kind of like a news story. But the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, it's hysterical. It was 100 years later. Oh, the visions of demons with horns came across the sea. The Norsemen landed at the Holy Island of Lindisfarne and laid waste. And the demons were seen, and all this propaganda, all this like garbage, And that was because they were putting the fear into everyone in Europe that these guys would look at the devil were coming to get the rest of you. And that's because hysterical language it was, and they were terrified. And that's when the propaganda war against the Vikings began. But more importantly, this gave the Vikings the confidence to actually do anything because they knew they were never going to be caught ever again. And so when they hit Lindisfarne, and the most Alcyone, the Anglo-Saxon chronicler in the court of Charlemagne, who reported about Lindisfarne, the most telling of all the statements that he writes down is, our Christian people have done nothing to protect the monks. In fact, they stood by while the monks were pillaged and attacked by the Norsemen. And worse still, they seem to be developing an uncomfortable familiarity with the Viking ways and culture, starting to dress like them and follow their gods. So the exact opposite of what they said happened. The Vikings came in, they hit the monastic military institutions, and the locals didn't run in fear. The locals ran up and says, thank you, you freed us. And that's the story of what the Vikings really were. They were liberators of Europe. They were not oppressors.